It's been a while since I've shown everyone around the simulator, and there have been a few upgrades of recent times. So let me take a few minutes and give you a bit of a walk around and an update as we take ourselves through the sim. Okay, let's start with a walk around the outside before we go to the inside. And here we have the operator station adjacent to the simulator. Just running a standard, so I think it's a 27 or 32 inch monitor there. Nothing flash, just a keyboard, mouse, yeah, little desk in there with a little bit of some trinkets inside of it, but that's where I generally will set up the flight simulation, whatever I want to be flying. Yeah, nothing flash, very small little desk, and obviously we're looking at the main sim here. So really what you're looking at as we go around, obviously I have the 55 inch wraparound 4K TVs, they're the Samsung units, and if you can see here as we look down, you've got TV stands, freestanding TV stands on the left and right, and we'll show you that in a moment. And you can see there as well the legs actually poke underneath the frame, so I have the frame on blocks so that I can get those legs to go underneath and therefore get the TVs in close proximity to the actual side of the unit there. And you can probably see that a bit better when you come into like that. You see that? So they're quite close and at 90 degrees. And if I just pan there down there for you there, you can see that's all off the floor. So they're 100mm blocks, so I've got 100mm or 10 centimeters off the floor, and that's that there. Obviously the frame's all painted up black, which looks a lot better now because I used to just have it in the raw timber, so that's all black through there. What else can I show you around here? Well, obviously I've just got all cable managed as well, so again coming off the TV, you can see I've run all these nice little clips when I put this all back together again. So these clips will just clip all the cabling in and I'll wrap it around. I'll show you that when we get around the front. Pair of headphones there that I just hang off the frame. I use those headphones when I'm obviously at the operator station. Yeah, that's that bit. So let's carry on around. I won't show you inside the sim, we'll do that in a moment. We'll go around the other side here. Similar setup. Obviously I apologise for the camera work, it's a bit tight in the room, but exactly the same on this side as you can see. Another freestanding unit which creeps underneath the frame, and we come around to the side here, and this is where the main action's happening. I'm just going to pan it back a little bit here, but obviously you can see the two mechanical links between the pilot and the co-pilot yoke, and this is mechanically linked. So this is obviously the slave unit, that's the master unit, because that's where we've got all the potentiometers, you know, for both pitch and roll on that side there. So obviously master's on the pilot, and this just is a slave unit here. I did have this banded in, but I've got a bit of friction already, so I've taken the bands away for the time being, and I'm actually looking at this as another upgrade at a later point in time. So that'll be that. The front monitor actually doesn't go on a free TV stand, as you can see. It actually is part of the frame, or not part of the frame, but it's actually sitting on the frame. Got some small little cutouts here that I had to do in design, I made these little 3D printed pieces here which just keep it nice and level to the other one. Each of those monitors has got that black Gorilla tape, which is a very high industrial tape, and full block out. So that's there on both sides, and that works really well just to lock them down. It's very, very adhesive tape, so be mindful of it, but it works a treat. While I've got him here, I'm just looking up the top there. So I've got obviously I'm also enclosed inside. So I've got this little bit of MDF here that I painted black, and that obviously goes back. That actually goes back in between like that, and it gives me that inside, you know, so that I'm looking from the inside out. I've got a nice black cover, which adds to the immersion as well. Yeah, and obviously there's some struts here just protecting that front screen from flopping back and forth that way. You can see all the cables coming around here being routed around the back, so obviously everything's all coming through around the back, and it starts to get a little bit untidy through there. It's not too bad, probably looks a bit worse on camera than what it actually is in reality, I've got all the cables all marked in terms of what goes where, and I've also got that on a little diagram offline as well, which I use just to make sure I've got everything mapped properly. I'm running a single USB hub, but I do have 10 USB ports on the back of this computer, by the way, and I purposely picked the motherboard to be high on the USB port count. I think there's 11 or 12, I think there's 12 that are actually through here, all up. So that plus the USB hub there gives me all the USB ports that I need. Plus I'm maximising the ones at the front there as well. You don't need to get too much into the specs of the computer. It's obviously a 3090 Ti graphics card running a 12900K, and I'm actually now running 64 gig of RAM. The reason I upgraded the RAM was more so because of the multitasking. Has it helped? Don't know. Hard to say, but it's still running relatively well. What else is in here? If I can just take you through, show you. I'm just going to try and show you in here. You can see there, if I can show you very clearly, that's the Bodnar Board at the back. That's the one where a lot of the instruments are coming into. That's a BUO836X, yeah, so that's where a lot of the stuff you can see is being wired into. So sorry for the camera work there. So that's that one, and I've obviously got another small little Bodnar Board that I use over here, and that's primarily for pitch roll and my push to talk mechanisms as well for pilot and co-pilot and so on. And you can see my pitch, which is the potentiometer through there, front and up and down, and then my roll is another potentiometer that I've got hooked in to directly into the back of the shaft there for the pilot side. You can see it's running on a couple of bearings, and then just running through to the panel at the front, relatively straightforward. So I think that's pretty much it for the purpose of the frame, and have a bit of a walk around there. Let's go now and get into the sim. Before we jump in, there are some things that unfortunately the cameras won't pick up inside the sim itself, so I'll probably need to do this via the mobile, and I do apologise in advance for the lack of audio quality. So aesthetically, off to the left hand side, I've got a fire extinguisher there. It is real, but just got it from the local hardware store. Obviously not in its correct position. Normally that would be down in front of the, I believe, in front of the center console there, but certainly that's just there for aesthetic reasons. Above that, this is where I hang my headphones there, so I've got a custom 3D printed little hanger there, and obviously the headphones come off and sit there like that for when I'm getting ready to go. Down below on that side there, it's on the pilot side here, I've just got effectively a little steel, I think it's steel or aluminium, little stacking trays there, just for flight plans and some reference books and bits and pieces. That's quite useful for future reference. Moving around to the left hand side there again, because this will all be off camera, you can see down on the floor down there, that's a 3D printed pocket that I've got, and I think I've talked about that in a previous live stream as well. I've got my Turtle Beach rudder pedals on the left hand side there, which you can see. I'll come back to the center console in a moment because you won't also pick that up, but we'll get back to that. Off to the right, there's another one down there, as you can see in front there, which has got the checklist, as you can probably tell. Here's my little table that is off camera that I use. That's obviously got the Stream Deck there, and obviously I've got some bits and pieces that I use for my flight planning or whatever I'm doing at the time, and a TV remote stuck on there for the 3 TVs. So that's just a little table there that I use so I can refer to when I'm doing my bits. Right hand side's got a very similar setup. There's another extinguisher off to the right. Again, this is purely for aesthetics when people walk into the room, just to say, oh, you got a couple of extinguishers, and yes we do. Hopefully we never have a fire. And then again, a similar setup to what we had on the left hand side there. There's your stacking trays. Now these ones are a little bit different. This is more readily available to me, so because when I'm sitting in the pilot's seat, I want to be able to reach across to that. That's a lot easier to get to than trying to reach behind to go to the left hand side. So here's where I have my, generally I have my checklist, nav logs, all those sorts of things, my notes for VFR, IFR and so on. So that's ready reference type stuff there. Moving on through, I've got some decent light here, so I might as well show you what I've got, and I'll just point to it, and we can see the panel a bit further on, so we'll do that in sim, but to maybe just show you to finish off on the center console. So I have talked about this in a previous stream before, but obviously I've got my trim wheel there that's 3D printed with the rotary encoders inside, or rotary encoder inside there. For the trimming, and obviously there's a servo switch off to the left hand side there for my trim indicator. Down here I've just got 6 toggle switches. I don't use those as much in FS 2020, and certainly now that I've got the Stream Deck here, sort of made that a little bit redundant. But I do actually have that. You can see that little toggle switch, the red one to the left hand side there. That's just my emergency fuel cutoff. They're generally a pull, but I've just made it a toggle there. And those are just 6 toggle switches that are talking to the Leo Bodnar board, and they are independent. I can program them to whatever I want. That in front there is obviously your fuel selector, currently sitting on both, but that's a 90-degree switch, and I can turn that through 90 degrees either way, to the left tanks, to the right tanks, or both. And that's all encased in a MDF based center console, which again you would have seen on a previous live stream when I was going through my build series there, so feel free to check that video out at your leisure. That's the center console. Let's now we will go into Streamlabs, sorry, and I'll take you in and we'll walk around the panel pieces itself. Back in a sec.
Okay, here we are now, and into the pilot's chair. By the way, I didn't talk about the pilot's chair, which if you didn't pick it up already, it's just a simple office chair, nothing flash. You know, it's okay for the first couple of hours, but if you're doing long flights, your bum can get a little bit sore. So it's comfortable, but it's certainly not something that I would want to run an endurance on. Anyway, it's relatively cheap, movable, and I find it quite fine for the purpose of what I do here. Right, let's take you around the panel itself. Obviously, I've got a glass cockpit here, G1000, and I hope you can pick it up. But effectively, if we just look at the structure itself, so I've talked about the Glareshield before. That was obviously all handmade, and you can check out the previous build series for the Glareshield itself. It obviously is removable, so I can pick this up. So if I want to get into the panel behind for instrumentation, I can do that. So that's just literally drops down on there. Rather than being bolted down. Similarly with the actual panel itself, 6mm MDF, and that was all done through Fusion 360 and cut to suit, which was great. In terms of some of the instrumentation and stuff that we've got, and other panels, we've got a Simionic switch panel over to the left here. I don't know if you can see that or not, but there's a Simionic panel off to the left. I originally did have my own, but I went away and bought this Simionic one, and I think it's fantastic. So I'm using that Simionic panel there. Moving across, we've got a Simionic MFD, and so PFD and MFD. And I've got those and the audio panel in between, Simionic, and 2 9.7-inch iPads, which suit those Simionic bezels themselves. Simionic have recently updated these bezels now, and they now run the larger size 10.2-inch iPads, but for me that's fine, and so that's what they are there. If we just go down to the standbys here, which you can see, now these are all 3D printed gauges. So again, kudos to Captain Bob. All of these here were picked up from the videos that he's provided. And I can leave a link below for Captain Bob. But I've got typically the aircraft the normal aircraft only has 3. But when I built this simulator, I actually went a little bit wider, I think about 150mm wider on the interior on purpose, just to give myself a little bit more room. And because of that, I was able to introduce another gauge, and I thought, well, why not? I had the space to do it. So I've got, we've got airspeed, altitude, and engine RPM and they are there, all 3D printed, and there's servo controls at the back that will plug directly into USB ports via the Arduinos into the computer. You can't see it down on the left hand side here, but basically this is where your breakers would be, your circuit breakers. I don't have any actual working circuit breakers. What I do have is two 3D printed panels. Again, I covered this in my build series. I simply made white 3D printed with raised lettering, and sprayed that grey, and then used wet and dry to bring up the white lettering. So it's purely aesthetic. What is real though, again you can't see it off to the left, is the ignition barrel, which does have a spring return, and that is another Simionic purchase part. And again works really well. So I like that because of the spring return that you have from the start when you go to move to start. Coming across here into the throttle and mixture, again this is, I've covered this in the build series, but this was all done from first principles. This is not a purchased item. I've purchased the linear potentiometers that are inside of this, but this is effectively just a 100mm travel linear potentiometers, which are connected via some shafts and little bits and pieces inside of there to give me that. They're not friction controlled. I don't have the vernier friction control, nor do I have the push buttons on those as well. They're purely, you know, in, out, max, min sort of thing. But they do the job for the GA flying, and I'm quite happy with them. Off to the right hand side there, again, you probably can't see it. I'll do my best, hopefully, but there's a flaps panel there. And I did actually purchase this flaps panel from Desktop Aviator, which was great, but I did change out the fascia plate from Desktop Aviators to this one here, and primarily because I wanted to get some raised lettering up to sort of match the other stuff that I've got, but effectively everything else, the mechanics of it, are all Desktop Aviator. So a pretty good flaps panel. It doesn't have the pull-out detent part that I think others do. Is literally just, you know, going through the motions up and down, but fully functional there and works really well. Over to the right there, you probably can't see it, but there's a little cutout in there, which effectively like a, I call it like a glove box or something, like a little mini shelf inside of there. What's inside of that, or what's resting on that, is the remote control. It's not even remote, it is the controller for the Butkicker that sits under the floor here. So what I do have is a transducer that is mounted underneath the floor of this particular simulator, because this simulator actually is raised off the floor, because the frames for each of the side TVs, the stands, have legs on them, and those legs go underneath the sim. So I've got the sim off the floor by about, I think it's about 100mm on blocks, and the stands go underneath that. So there's a transducer in there that's underneath the floor as well, and that gives me that vibration, you know, turbulence, ground effect rolls and those sorts of things, which adds to a bit of the immersion. And I can dial that up or down depending on if I'm feeling it or not in the sim itself, rather than having to get out, walk around the back and adjust it there. So that's just what that is there. Obviously I've got the other thing I've got here is an iPad mini, as I just show it here now. So the iPad mini I use extensively, and the iPad mini is basically where I have all my Navigraph charts. So I've got Navigraph here, I've got VATSIM, VATScope, you know, all sorts of things that I can run here, Windy. I've got world clock for Zulu timing and so on. So anything that's ready reference type as well that I use for this. And you'll probably see in some of my other videos and so on. I've got an NDI plugin as well. So via the Streamlabs, I'm able to show show you guys what I'm looking at on the iPad when I connect that in for recording purposes. The yokes are 3D printed yokes. They're identical yokes, and this is probably one of the things that, whilst I like it, and certainly I think aesthetically they look good, and it's great to have them in a dual configuration, as you can see here. I certainly don't get any force feedback, and to be honest with you, this is one area of my simulator that, whilst I do like it, I do want to improve it. So watch this space, because I think over time I may be looking to do something a little bit different here. But in terms of functionality, I've got, basically, obviously pitch and roll, as you can see, and as you can see, they're mechanically linked at the back, so you're getting the effect of the Copilot's one moving at the same time, which I think looks pretty cool. I've got push to talk on the left hand side here. I've got electric trim button as well. I've got another push to talk on the right side if I need it. I've actually got that one set up for Discord. So if I want to run push to talk on a Discord platform as opposed to push to talk via VATSIM or Beyond ATC, that's there. But other than that, that's pretty much it. And it's the same setup on the Copilot side as well. So push to talk on both, and trim control as well. But yeah, they're very good yokes. It's very solid, which is good, but it's certainly, from a travel point of view and so on, it probably could be a little bit better. I did miss the compass, so I've got the wet compass here, and again, that's a great little unit. That's a Simionic unit again. I'm not affiliated with Simionic, by the way, but I just happen to like some of their products. I think they're quite well priced, and certainly for what I'm getting. And in fact, I'm actually contemplating on getting some Simionic standby gauges to progressively change some of this out. But I'll keep you posted on that, and I'll certainly let you know if I decide to do that at a later point in time. But the Simionic wet compass, again, it plugs directly in, inside the back of the panel here. It plugs directly into the switch panel, and they talk to each other, and that works perfectly, and it's backlit. You probably can't see that, but it is backlit there. I'll just move to the left-hand side here, because you probably can't see it, but just below me here, I actually have also the reticulation of this cable actually plugs into a headphone jack that I've put in down on the left-hand side here, which you can't see. And in front of that, I've also mounted a USB female jack as well. And that's so I can actually charge the iPad inside of here, so I can literally grab I've got a live USB port here which I can plug in, and I've done the same thing on the right hand side as well. So there's a USB port currently that's used for the Stream Deck. There's also a headphone jack as well for the Copilot should they decide to be with me at the time. Moving up, and you probably can't see this as well, but you can see I've got a couple of visors here. These are straight out of a car, so they just more aesthetics. They don't really do anything functionally, but I think they look pretty good. Certainly adding to a bit of the immersion and giving that feel from your perspective of being as best we can inside of a real aircraft. So that's what they are there. I've also got a light here, which is literally an LED on off that I've bought from a local hardware store. You've obviously just seen the switch of that at the moment. And that lights up the cabin in the evenings, and certainly when I'm a bit darker if I need to. It's not the best of lights, but certainly it does a pretty good job. I think I've pretty well covered the bulk of it now. Obviously, I could talk more about the frame and so on, but I think I've done that through the build series. As you know, I've got a physical frame here as well, and hence the reason and part of my frustration in the past, where certainly in FS 2020 we had that virtual cockpit, which was, and the virtual fuselage shell, which has obviously been separate to the physical one, and it it doesn't look very good. So if you don't have a physical shell, then it's great. But if you do have a physical shell, it is a bit of I think a bit of an impediment. But not anymore. As you can see, it's probably not quite in its proper position from the wing perspective point of view, and certainly the zoom. But in terms of where I've got it right now for FS 2020, I think you'll agree it's a much better look than what it was before. Something I actually forgot to mention was the cameras here that I have. So I'm using the Logitech C922s, and I have 3 of them. Obviously the one that I'm looking at right now firing to the front, and then there's one to the right here, which is looking over the pilot wing, and one above me looking over the co-pilot side. So they work really well. They obviously run in 1080p. And I generally record those in 30 frames a second, which gives a pretty good quality, certainly from both the recording and the streaming perspective. You'll notice over the top of those that you probably can't see quite all of it, but I've got these little covers that I 3D printed, and that was primarily to protect the camera from my head hitting the underside of it. I found, and if you look through some of my very older videos, or much older videos, you'll notice that I didn't used to have these covers on, and there was a couple of times there where I would record an entire episode not realizing that I've hit this part of the headset on the underside of the camera and jolted it out of position. So to stop that, I've put these covers over the top of them, and I never get that problem anymore. So there we go. Hope you enjoyed that, and let's get up and onwards, and look forward to catching up with you next time. If you liked what you saw, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Tell all your friends, all that kind of great stuff, and I'll catch you on the next one. All right, bye for now.